we're going to film again with Steven Seagal. So we're like, Steven Seagal is the good guy. He's going to come and catch us. Be careful. This guy, the first thing he's going to do, he's like, hey, he's going to shake your hand and hit you in the nuts, kick you in the nuts. That's the first thing he does. Right? Why? Exactly. Why?
He actually tore Mills's bicep for no reason. And one time he chopped James Lew in the throat for no freaking reason. And I just snapped.
And Steven Seagal, who I'd been in this movie with, I was trying to talk to him about this scene, and he told me I was standing in his cheek.
He asked me this thing about, like, I needed to ask him what the essence of Zen was. So he walked out, and I went, hello, Steven Seagal, I'm a fan of yours. What is the essence of Zen? And he threw me in a fountain. He didn't tell me that he was going to do that. He just threw me in a pond, and then just walked off and got into his car and drove off.
There is a Hollywood legend about Steven Seagal that involves a chokehold, a stuntman, and a very specific bodily function occurring in a pair of Aikido pants. But that humiliating moment is actually the least insane thing about him. The real story involves the CIA, a tank, a dead puppy, and a level of delusion that ends with him as Vladimir Putin's best friend. If you grew up in the late 80s or early 90s, Steven Seagal wasn't just a movie star. He was a mood. Schwarzenegger was a cartoon character. Stallone was a tragic hero. Van Damme was a gymnast who could do the splits on kitchen counters. But Seagal was the guy who didn't flinch. He was the efficient killer. He snapped wrists like breadsticks, barely broke a sweat, and spoke in a whisper that suggested he knew secrets that would topple governments. And for a while, we bought it. We bought it because he told us it was real. He wasn't acting. He claimed that he was just letting the cameras roll on his actual lethal skill set. But as the years went by, the stories started trickling out. At first, they were funny. Then, they were weird. And finally, they were horrifying. The truth is, the character Steven Seagal played on screen, the honorable warrior protecting the weak, wasn't just fiction. It was the exact opposite of the man living inside the leather jacket. Let's peel back the layers of the ponytail, starting with the foundation of the House of Seagal, the lies. Every superhero needs an origin story, and Steven Seagal decided to write himself a good one. The official narrative went like this. A young Steven travels to Japan, becomes the first foreigner to operate an Aikido dojo, fights the Yakuza in the streets, and masters the mystic arts. He claimed that between 1968 and 1973, he was studying directly under Morihei Ueshiba, the legendary founder of Aikido. There's just one tiny mathematical problem with that timeline. Ueshiba died in 1969. Seagal didn't move to Japan until 1971, or possibly as late as 1973. Unless he mastered the art of necromancy along with the wrist lock, he never met the man. But in Seagal's mind, facts are just suggestions. But why stop at martial arts? Seagal needed to be an international man of mystery. In interviews during the height of his fame, he heavily implied, and sometimes outright stated, that he worked as an advisor to the CIA. He claimed he did special works and favors for agents in the field. He hinted at covert operations in Cambodia. He wanted us to believe that Above the Law wasn't a script, it was a documentary. Even his heritage was a choose-your-own-adventure book. His ethnicity changed more often than his ponytail stayed the same. Depending on the interview, he was Italian, Russian, Mongolian, or pure Mohawk. He once said he was more Asian than American, despite being born in Lansing, Michigan. The man treated his ancestry like a costume he could swap out depending on who was asking. His actual heritage? Russian Jewish on his father's side, Irish on his mother's. The man claiming to be an unkillable Mongolian warrior mystic? His own mother told People magazine he was a frail, puny kid who suffered from asthma in Michigan. Thanks, Mom. She really saw him on TV snapping necks and said that boy couldn't even snap out of an asthma attack. But in 1988, facts didn't matter. Hollywood super agent Michael Ovitz saw a tall, good-looking guy who could throw people around, and he saw dollar signs. He bet that he could turn anyone into a star, and he was right. What Ovitz didn't know, or didn't care about, was that Seagal had a wife and 2 children back in Japan. Miyako Fujitani had helped him build his dojo. She'd been there during all those alleged Yakuza fights and CIA missions. Funny how she never mentioned any of that. What she did mention was that after Steven left for Hollywood, she was raising their kids alone on nothing. Sometimes we could only afford cheap brown rice for dinner, she said. Meanwhile, Steven was too busy to send money, too busy getting married again to actress Adrienne LaRussa while still legally married to Miyako. And while he was married to LaRussa, he got another actress, Kelly LeBrock, pregnant. 3 women, exposed within a few years, before he even became a household name. Remember that. It becomes a pattern. While Seagal was preaching peace and saving the environment on screen, he was terrorizing people off it. Stuntmen have called him the worst person to work with in the business. Why? Because he hit people for real. Stuntmen are paid to sell the hit, not to actually take it. But Seagal, perhaps insecure about his own legitimacy as a martial artist, would actually strike them. He was famous for the nut check. He was just walking up to unsuspecting stuntmen and kicking them in the groin to see if they were wearing a cup. No warning, just walked up and kicked. It wasn't just stuntmen, he didn't respect legends. Before he was even famous, while working as a martial arts coordinator on the Bond film Never Say Never Again, he allegedly grew frustrated with Sean Connery during training and broke the actor's wrist. Let me say that again. He broke James Bond's wrist because he couldn't control his ego.
But a number of years ago with a guy who's become very successful, Steven Seagal.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we're going to do a film called Never Say Never Again, and there was a possibility I was going to do Aikido and what have you, and I got a hold of Steven, and we had this training in the building where I had an apartment, and he was really very, very good and everything, and then I got a little cocky because I thought I knew what I was doing, because, you know, the principle is it's defense, so it's a pyramid, and I got a bit flash, and I did that, and he broke my wrist.
But the most famous bullying story involves actor John Leguizamo. Leguizamo told a story about working on Executive Decision.
What did Steven Seagal do to you? We were in rehearsals for Executive Decision, and he comes in, I'm in command. What I say is law. Anybody doesn't agree? And I was like, I started cracking up because he sounded like a retard, and he came up and he taekwondo'd my ass against the brick wall. He went, he's 6'5" and caught me off guard, knocked all the air at me. I was like,
Right.
why? What I really want to say is how big and fat he is, how he runs like a girl, because he does.
But here's the thing about movie Executive Decision. Seagal's behavior got so bad that the studio actually did something about it. Kurt Russell, his co-star, reportedly went to Warner Brothers and essentially said, him or me. The studio rewrote the script to kill Seagal's character in the first act. They sucked him out of a plane. It is one of the most satisfying deaths in cinema history, mostly because you know the cast was cheering behind the scenes. But the ultimate story of karma comes from the set of Out for Justice. This is the story Seagal hates the most. It involves Gene LeBell. For context, Gene LeBell was a legitimate legend. A judo champion who once fought a boxer in one of the first televised MMA matches in history. He was affectionately known as the Godfather of Grappling. The real deal, not a guy who claimed to train under dead masters. As the story goes, confirmed by multiple witnesses including stuntman Stephen Lambert, Seagal was bragging that his Aikido training made him immune to chokeholds. He claimed he could just move his neck and escape any chokehold. Aikido made him unchokeable. LeBell, who was in his late 50s at the time, accepted the challenge. He let Seagal get ready. Seagal tried to hit LeBell in the groin, his signature cheap shot naturally. LeBell blocked it, spun Seagal around, and applied a rear naked choke. Seagal didn't just go to sleep. According to legend, the pressure on his system was so sudden and intense that he evacuated his bowels. Yes. Steven Seagal, the unstoppable Aikido master who couldn't be choked, reportedly crapped himself while unconscious. Guess the CIA didn't train him for that. When LeBell was asked about it years later, he gave the most diplomatically savage quote in Hollywood history. If a guy soils himself, you can't criticize him. Because if they just had a nice big dinner an hour before, you might have a tendency to do that. Seagal naturally denies this ever happened, calling LeBell a pathological scumbag liar. But in the stunt community, the story is gospel, and LeBell's reputation for honesty was spotless for 60 years. So, who do you believe? The Godfather of Grappling with dozens of witnesses, or the guy who claimed to train under a man who'd been dead for years? By 1991, Seagal was an A-lister. And like all A-listers, he was invited to host Saturday Night Live. To this day, if you ask Lorne Michaels or David Spade who the worst host in SNL history was, they don't say a controversial politician or a diva pop star, they say Steven Seagal. Most action stars understand the assignment. Make fun of yourself. The Rock does it. Arnold did it. Hell, even Van Damme figured it out eventually. Seagal didn't get the memo. He refused to do a sketch where Hans and Franz would beat him up because he genuinely believed it would hurt his image as a deadly warrior. He reportedly told the writers, "I just wish Arnold was here so I could kick his ass." He wasn't joking because he never jokes. But the darkest moment came during the pitch meeting. Former cast member Julia Sweeney revealed that Seagal pitched a sketch where he played a therapist. In his pitch, a female patient comes in reporting SA. Seagal's character then tries to sleep with her, explaining, "That's what therapists do." The room went silent. He wasn't joking. He thought this was comedy. The man genuinely could not tell the difference between people laughing with him and people laughing at him. The bullying was bad, but the way he allegedly treated women was worse. By the mid-90s, the casting couch stories about Seagal were an open secret in Hollywood. Jenny McCarthy recounted an audition for Under Siege 2. She was told there was no nudity in the film, so she wore a muumuu to the audition to force them to look at her face instead of her body. Seagal allegedly told her to take off the dress because he needed to see what he was working with. When she refused, he followed her out to her car, warning her not to tell anyone. Portia de Rossi shared a similar story. During an audition in his office, she claims Seagal told her, "It's important to have chemistry off-screen," and then unzipped his leather pants. She ran out of the room. Juliana Margulies, yes, the star of The Good Wife, says she was asked to go to his hotel room late at night to go over scenes. When she arrived, she claimed she found Seagal alone, holding a gun. She talked her way out of the room and fled. Warner Brothers was reportedly so aware of his behavior that during the filming of Out for Justice, they paid out settlements to 4 different female assistants who accused him of harassment. 4 women on one production. And the studio's response wasn't to fire him, it was to pay everyone off so the box office money could keep rolling in. Remember Miyako, eating brown rice while raising his kids alone? Remember the 3 women before he was even famous? This wasn't a phase, this was a pattern spanning decades. By the late 90s, the audience had caught on. The movies were flopping. Seagal was gaining weight, losing hair, and losing his grip on reality. He started wearing kimonos to hide his girth and refused to stand up during fight scenes, birthing the internet genre known as chair Aikido. Fire Down Below in 1997 cost $60 million to make. It only earned $16 million. That's not a flop, that's a career extinction event. After that, no studio would touch him with real money. His budgets dropped from $60 million to around $6 million. He went from red carpet premieres to direct-to-DVD releases. The kind of movies you find in gas station bargain bins next to off-brand energy drinks. He made dozens of them. All forgettable, all straight to video. But Seagal wasn't done reinventing himself. He decided he was a cop. Had been for 20 years, apparently. Nobody could verify this, but sure. He produced a reality show called Steven Seagal Lawman, where he rode around with sheriff's deputies in Louisiana and Arizona, teaching them Aikido moves and pretending to be a real officer. In 2011, for an episode of the show, Seagal participated in a raid on the home of Jesus' Levera, a man suspected of raising roosters for cockfighting. A misdemeanor offense. Did they knock on the door? Send a couple deputies to ask some questions? No, Seagal and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office rolled up in a tank, an actual tank. They smashed through the man's front gate. They deployed flashbang grenades. In the chaos, they killed over 100 of the man's roosters. But the most heartbreaking casualty was the family's 11-month-old puppy, which was shot and killed during the raid. All for a TV show. Also, Steven Seagal could play cop on camera. Levera sued for $100,000, demanding a written apology for his children who witnessed their puppy being killed. Seagal's response? He claimed he was an animal lover and that calling him an abuser was beyond the pale. The puppy was 11 months old, but sure, Steven, you're the victim here. The show was canceled shortly after. With his Hollywood career dead and buried, Seagal turned to the grift. In 2018, he became the brand ambassador for a cryptocurrency called Bitcoin 2Gen, because nothing says legitimate investment opportunity like Steven Seagal's endorsement. He told his followers not to miss out on this revolutionary opportunity. What he didn't tell them was that he was being paid $250,000 in cash and $750,000 in tokens to say that. The SEC charged him with unlawful touting. He agreed to pay $330,000 in fines. He paid $75,000 and then he stopped paying and moved to Russia. But before he fled the country, Seagal made one last mistake. He did a Reddit AMA, an Ask Me Anything, where regular people could pose questions directly to him. He expected softballs about his movies, maybe some questions about Aikido philosophy. What he got was, "What kind of pants were you wearing when Gene LeBell choked you unconscious and caused you to soil yourself? I personally know a stuntman who had all of his front teeth knocked out by you and said you didn't even apologize. Why?" And my personal favorite, "Hey, I went to the same junior high school as you. Did you steal lunch money from a kid in a wheelchair?" He abandoned the AMA within minutes. Classic Seagal. When reality shows up, he runs. With debts mounting, allegations swirling, and his reputation in the toilet, literally, Seagal found the only place that would still treat him like a king, Vladimir Putin's Russia. He befriended Putin, calling him one of the greatest world leaders and a real man. In 2016, Putin personally handed him a Russian passport in a televised ceremony. Seagal was appointed a special representative for humanitarian ties between Russia and the United States. In 2023, Putin pinned the Order of Friendship medal on Seagal's chest. He has gone full propagandist. He visited the ruins of a prison in Ukraine, parroting Kremlin talking points. He wrote a letter to Putin stating he was ready to die for his president. The man who played the ultimate American patriot. The Navy SEAL, the Chicago cop, the CIA operative, is now living in Moscow, shilling for a regime that opposes everything his characters supposedly stood for. Steven Seagal is a case study in what happens when you believe your own lies. He spent decades constructing a myth that he was a warrior, a mystic, a hero, a healer, a cop, a spy. But every layer of that myth, when you pulled it back, revealed something rotten underneath. A bully who terrorized anyone smaller than him, a liar who couldn't keep his own origin story straight, a predator enabled by studios who cared more about box office than basic human decency, a grifter who stiffed the SEC and fled the country. The irony is that if he had just been an actor, if he had laughed at the SNL jokes, treated his colleagues with basic respect, and kept his leather pants zipped, he might have aged into a beloved elder statesman of action cinema. Arnold did it, Stallone did it, even Van Damme figured out how to be in on the joke. Instead, Steven Seagal became the joke and then he ran from it. He wanted to be remembered as a master of Aikido. History will remember him as the guy who got choked out by Gene LeBell, soiled himself, scammed his fans, and ran away to Russia to hide from the truth. The universe doesn't always deliver justice, but sometimes it does.